Hey, welcome back. You know, sometimes the most dangerous stories aren't the ones hidden in shadowy back alleys, but the ones conducted in broad daylight, under the official seal of a government. This is a story about a secret war, a civilian airline, and an unintended epidemic that would ripple across decades and oceans, all the way to the streets of my hometown of Dhaka and to my adopted home here in New York. It's a story where the lines between good guys and bad guys don't just blur, they completely vanish. I'm Ibnul J. Farabi, and this is Underworld Kings, The Rise and Fall. And in this episode, we're following a very specific and very toxic supply chain. We're talking about the smack track, how the CIA's airline fueled the heroin epidemic. Let's set the stage. It's the 1950s, the Cold War is ice cold, and America is desperate for allies in Asia. The CIA needs a way to move agents, weapons, and cash around, completely off the books. So, they create their own proprietary airline. It's called Air America. Officially, it's a civilian charter operation. In reality, it's a covert arm of U.S. intelligence, and it becomes absolutely vital to a secret war most Americans knew nothing about, the war in Laos. Now, our other key player is a group called the Hmong. They're an ethnic minority in Laos, and the CIA recruits, trains, and arms them to fight communist Pathet Lao forces. The Hmong are incredibly effective guerrilla fighters, but they're stuck in remote, mountainous regions with no roads. Their entire supply line, their lifeline, is Air America. Planes would drop everything: rice, medicine, ammunition. And in return, the Hmong needed a cash crop to fund their part of the war. Opium was that crop. It was traditional, it grew well in the highlands, and it was incredibly valuable by weight. So you have this perfect, terrible ecosystem. The Hmong grow and refine opium into heroin. They need to get it to market. And the only reliable transportation network in and out of their territory is, you guessed it, the CIA's own airline. Now, to be absolutely clear, declassified documents and investigations have never found a direct CIA order to traffic heroin. But the policy was one of plausible deniability and accommodation. The agency's primary objective was to fight communism at all costs. If that meant looking the other way while their key allies used their transportation network to move opium, so be it. If it meant that some of their own pilots, who were after all civilian contractors paid by the CIA, decided to make a little extra money on the side by carrying a few extra packages, well, that was a risk they were willing to accept. This is where the smack track gets its name. It was an open secret. The heroin would move from remote airstrips in Laos, often on Air America planes or its sister airline, Continental Air Services, to major hubs like Vientiane or Bangkok. From there, it entered the global market, and a significant amount of it was destined for a new, hungry market: American soldiers in Vietnam. Think about the brutal irony. The U.S. government is fighting a war on one front and indirectly facilitating the flow of heroin to its own troops on another. By the early 1970s, heroin use among U.S. servicemen in Vietnam was epidemic. The Pentagon estimated that nearly 15% of soldiers were addicted to heroin that was up to 95% pure, stuff far stronger than anything on American streets. They called it SCAG, and a lot of it came down the pipeline that Air America had helped keep open. The war ends. American troops pull out. Air America is dissolved in 1976, its cover finally blown. But the machinery it helped create doesn't just switch off. The networks, the connections, the expertise, they'd been baked into the system for over a decade. Southeast Asia's Golden Triangle had become a heroin production powerhouse, and the channels to get it to the West were now well established. The demand in the United States was already primed, first by returning veterans, and then by the growing urban crises of the 1970s. This is the part that always hits me personally. I think about the journey of a single brick of heroin, from a Hmong village in Laos, onto a plane that was, for all intents and purposes, an instrument of American foreign policy, to Saigon, then to ports and airports, and then it lands, maybe in New York, maybe it gets cut and packaged in the Bronx or Brooklyn, and its final stop isn't a statistic, it's a person, a life unraveled. Communities, from Harlem to Baltimore to my own neighborhoods back in Bangladesh, where this poison eventually also spread, were decimated. The war on drugs would later be declared with a heavy hand, but it rarely confronted this foundational, covert chapter of its own creation. So, who were the underworld kings in this story? It's complicated. It wasn't a single cartel boss or a mafia don. It was a convergence. Covert intelligence priorities, local warlords and tribal leaders, opportunistic pilots, and international crime syndicates ready to distribute. The king was the system itself, a system where the moral calculus of the Cold War justified overlooking, and thus enabling, a criminal enterprise of staggering scale. The legacy of the Smack track is a lesson in unintended consequences. It shows how a narrow, short-term goal, winning a tactical advantage in a secret war, can set in motion a wave of destruction that crashes on shores thousands of miles away for generations. It created a feedback loop of addiction, crime, and policy failure that we are still struggling with today. It reminds us that sometimes the most profound crimes aren't committed against individuals, but against truth and accountability. For me, Ibnul, as an engineer, I'm trained to look at systems. And this was a system designed with one primary function, but it had a catastrophic side effect. As a storyteller, I'm drawn to these hidden connections, these threads that tie a covert airstrip in Laos to a back alley in Manhattan. It's a stark reminder that history is rarely a simple story of heroes and villains. Often, it's a murky, complicated web where the pursuit of one kind of security can plant the seeds of a different kind of devastation. Thank you for listening to this episode of Underworld Kings. If this story connected the dots for you, if it made you look at a familiar history in a new light, please share it with someone. Tell them to look up Underworld Kings wherever they get their podcasts. We're a production of Light Knot Studios, dedicated to untying the complex knots of history's most fascinating stories. You can find more from us at lightknotstudios.com. Until next time, stay curious.